All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm trying a different format, so you can probably at the moment see my screensaver and hopefully my face too. I have shifted the face to the side because I do want to add a couple of slides to today's live chat, mostly to enable you to have some visual aids as well, but also so that it's not just my face that you're looking at all the time. As you probably know, today's topic is going to be pre and post workout nutrition and recommendations. We've had a couple of questions. I do want to keep it pretty basics for the most part because, in my opinion, pre and post workout nutrition is a little bit overrated as a topic overall. Unless somebody's already pretty advanced and we're looking into what can we do even better, how can we optimize things even more, then it's definitely something to dock onto. But of course, it needs to be pre-faced or basically I need to state beforehand that if our overall calories are of course the most important thing, macros the second most important thing, and so sleep and training in general, they need to be in a good place, hydration in a good place. Otherwise, we don't even need to worry about the timing and the specifics of pre and post workout nutrition. But let me get this this PowerPoint up. Here we go. Right, so these slides are not going to be anything super fancy, and I apologize if my camera might overlap at some point with the slides as well. I wasn't able to test it completely, but nonetheless, I put in a little bit of effort. So anyway, pre and post workout nutrition, what does it actually mean? Of course, our food consumption before and after our workout, essentially. Let's start with the timing. Pre-workout nutrition. What do we really need to consider? This really depends on what time of the day you're working out and what you ate before that as well. So let's just assume you're working out in the morning. Is it necessary to get up even earlier and to eat something? This really depends. If you are waking up and you're incredibly hungry, you're only going to diminish the results of your training if you don't eat something. Of course, unless you are in a steep calorie deficit and weight loss is the primary aim. Nonetheless, even in that case, we might want to look into shifting things a little bit around so that you have some food that you can carry into your training or that you consume before your training in order to be able to basically perform as best as possible. So if you're not hungry though, if you're not running out of energy midway through your workout, and if you have had a good dinner the night beforehand and you know that your energy stores are filled up, you do not need to consume anything beforehand. If your training is at like 9 a.m., 10 a.m., something like that, and you're like, oh, well, I can't really last that well, you could have a, small snack sort of thing 30 to 60 minutes beforehand, or an actual meal, let's say, depending on what it is, also about 90 minutes or 2 hours beforehand. That would be my recommendation here. Now, of course, if you're exercising in the afternoon, it's going to be a little bit different because, of course, you will have eaten something before your training. And here, timing really is incredibly important, just so that you don't work out with a full belly or so that you don't work out with your stomach really focusing or your body really focusing on the digestion and can't really put all the energy into your training. Or of course you're super hungry, you're just trying to basically get through it and you're super drained from the day anyway. So again, similar sort of scheme. Let's say snack 30 to 60 minutes prior. It could even be a little bit closer depending on the snack, or an actual meal at least 90 minutes to 2 hours beforehand. In most cases, let's say your workout is an hour, or even if it's an hour and a half, we don't really need to worry about intra-workout nutrition unless you're really just training for performance, or you are on a gaining phase and you don't really know where to fit in your calories otherwise anyway. Then some intra-workout carbs can be very beneficial. But it also depends on what sort of workout you are doing, because of course we don't want you to get weighed down by working out, by like consuming something in the middle of your workout, like even if it's a protein shake and then fills up your belly with all that fluid and so on. When it comes to hydration, yes, of course, we want to make sure we're consuming enough throughout the day, but we can really say hydrating according to thirst is generally the best policy, unless you are somebody who really forgets to drink all the time. In this instance, sometimes having a little bit something flavored can just help you enjoy your drink more. So even if things like EAAs or BCAAs are not necessarily recommended, because we hope that you consume a high protein diet anyway, or are not necessarily required, let me put it that way. But they can just be, if you just enjoy sipping on them, there's really nothing wrong with that. Or it could even just be like an electrolyte drink, something that makes you drink a little bit more. As the weather is getting warmer, you do really want to make sure that you're accounting for your sweat levels as well. And again, making sure we're covering our electrolytes also. So that means don't be afraid of adding some good quality salt to your meals, specifically if you are consuming a rather clean diet, so meaning not a lot of processed things. So even processed things like bread or wraps that are not necessarily bad or that are high quality do contain quite a bit of salt in order to make them taste better, so we don't really need to worry too much there. But if you're someone who's like, I'm really just sticking with my rice and potatoes and veggies and chicken, then there's hardly any electrolytes in that, so really do make sure that you're adding some salt to that, especially if you're sweating. Now when it comes to pre-workout, I actually should have written pre-workout, actual pre-workout supplement. Can you take it? Yeah, in most cases, if you're not super intolerant to or if super sensitive rather to the caffeine levels in there. Like for me personally, if I drink a caffeinated coffee, I'm already bouncing up and down the walls. Like I need to drink decaf almost always, otherwise my anxiety and my just like general energy levels go way through the roof, and then afterwards I experience a really hard crash. And I have taken pre-workout supplement like 3 times in my life, and first of all I get an incredible tingling on my skin, very uncomfortable. I turn bright red and my heart feels like it's bursting through my chest. So if you're that kind of person, and I started with like half the dosage, so please be careful with that. But in the afternoon, be mindful that it could interfere with your sleep. So I would rather, if you're finishing work and you're feeling super drained, I'd rather you have just a coffee and a banana, like some quick energy, and we'll get into the specific food sources in a little bit, but I'd rather you do that than basically an extra pre-workout supplements. In my opinion, most of the time, the additional things other than the caffeine or whatever is in there are not going to make a big difference to your performance. And I also personally don't want to have to rely on a supplement like that in order to be able to perform well. So, if you use it, I would use it strategically on days where you're really feeling like extra drained, and not always using it, so that you're kind of conditioning to your body to that, if that makes sense. Post-workout, okay, yes. So that we had a question in regards to that, and the question was basically, she heard that you should be having some protein within 45 minutes or something like that after your training. Now here I'm writing down, ideally some food within 1 or 2 hours after training at least. Of course, the closer to training, in my opinion, the better. Is it absolutely necessary, essential in order to see some progress in the gym? No. Are you going to see some gains most of the time if you eat 2.5 hours after your training? Yes, most likely. However, can you optimize your training and your recovery if you eat closer to the training time? Most likely also. Just think of it that way. So basically, you train, which means you're depleting your energy stores and you're causing a little bit of tissue damage in your muscles. The quicker after your training you can replenish those stores and you can start patching up this tissue damage, the better. Of course, if you still have something in your stomach or in your blood and so on floating around, your body is going to use that already for restoring. So it's not like a real sense of emergency if you don't eat anything. But you're going to help your body a lot just by replenishing that quicker. But the second point that I wrote down with regards to cortisol is actually, in my opinion, even more important, because any kind of training does bring up cortisol, so our stress level. Like, we do want to spike our cortisol to some extent. We do want some stress for our body, because that simply means next time we're going to try to adapt to that so that it's no longer a stressor or as much of a stressor. So cortisol and insulin are always in opposite directions. So if cortisol is high, insulin is usually low. Of course, there's a little bit more nuance to it, but this is kind of the general thing. Now, when we eat something, we increase insulin, or we spike insulin actually, we increase insulin, and therefore we automatically bring cortisol down. This is why when you are stressed, you're craving more food, specifically carbs, which help with the insulin or spike insulin a little bit more. So just from that perspective, you're going to help your recovery process a lot just by eating anything after your training. Of course, you can do the same thing with bringing cortisol down with breath work, with relaxation, with a little bit of stretching, with those kind of things that also reduce the stress load. But we're talking about food here, so this is basically what we're looking at. In regards to macros now, most people are pretty aware of the fact that in terms of strength training, protein is obviously very important, and this is what we want to focus on pre and post workout nutrition. We do want to focus on lean proteins. So what does that mean? I've given some examples: chicken breast, seafood, whitefish, turkey, egg whites, whey protein, low-fat cottage cheese. For the more plant-based people, of course, plant-based protein powders and any kind of seitan, tofu, or of course protein pairing through other meals and foods is fine as well. But the lean protein options, so meaning they contain not a lot of other carbs or fats, would be these ones to focus on, which are best absorbed by your body or quickest absorbed. Doesn't necessarily mean, again, that the plant-based options are not good. They are just gonna contain a little bit of carbs and fats as well most of the time. I've written down here, for the average female, it should be at least about 20 to 30 grams in that post-workout meal. Just to basically, this is like a really rough number. It really depends on how tall you are, of course, and so on. And for the average meal, I'd probably even bring that up to 40 grams at least, and change that a little bit here. But that's sort of what we're looking at. So what would that be? That would be about, a serving of protein powder. It would be about 100 grams of chicken, or in most cases, 200 grams of low-fat cottage cheese, some probably 200 milliliters of egg whites. I apologize, that was my water filter, in case you heard a blub. But anyway, so that's sort of the portion for the female, and of course double that for males, or roughly double that, or at least times and a half. And that would apply to pre and post. So in your pre and post workout meal, I would say that should be a reasonably good thing to aim for. If it's an actual meal, meaning like a lunch or dinner, ideally, we can most likely, in most cases, increase that even more because it's pretty easy to consume 100 grams of chicken breast. I'd probably increase that to like 150 or even more just to enable you more easily to hit your overall daily protein target. But it could also just be, in a protein bar, on average, most of the time there's at least 20 or 15 to 20 grams of protein in there, which is a really good start. When it comes to carbs, we also want to focus on simple carbs. So brown rice, for instance, not necessarily the best carb source pre or post workout. That's why we often talk about white rice being more ideal around training times because it is more easily digested and absorbed. So if you think of brown rice still having a little bit of that shell more or less on the outside, whereas white rice has been processed, so to speak, and without that shell on the outside, it's just more easily absorbed into the bloodstream. So again, white rice, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, oats, bread, wrapped fruit. What could that look like, or what have I mentioned here? And again, this is gonna be more dependent on what your calorie prescription is than the protein. Actually, in many cases, when you are on super low carbs, it's gonna be trickier. However, I would reserve at least a few carbs for your pre and post workout meal, just because that's when it's going to be utilized the best, even if you are in a calorie deficit. So for a female, I've written down at least 15 to 20 grams of carbs pre or post workout, and for males, most of the time, of course this is rough, 30 to 40 grams. So for a female, what could that be? It could be a cup of low-fat cottage cheese with some berries on top. It could be a protein bar, which usually contains carbs as well. It could be a wrap and some chicken in there with a little bit of vegetables and so on. So some examples, or of course, quick oats with protein powder mixed in, or quick oats cooked with egg whites. Those are some examples here. When it comes to fats, this is something to pay attention to. We do want to keep those low around training times in order to aid energy release and absorption, as it says. Why is that? Fats are not most difficult to digest. That's not correct. Protein is most difficult to digest in the sense of what's happening in your gut, but they simply feel heavier in your gut. If you want to picture it, it feels more like it's slowing everything down. So just keep that in mind, because around your training time, we do not want that to happen. On the opposite end of your day, let's say you are working out in the morning, then you're having your post-workout meal, which is your breakfast, and then in your lunch, for instance, we do want a good amount of fats in there to release the energy over the rest of the afternoon slowly. So that's always something to keep in mind. Therefore, what's not necessarily the best fatty protein sources, things like salmon is going to be suboptimal somewhat to tilapia or whatever whitefish post-workout, just as an example. Does that mean salmon is not a good protein source? Not at all whatsoever. We're just talking about optimizing things even more. Salmon is great. I love salmon. Same thing with eggs. Would scrambled eggs, 3 scrambled eggs cooked with a tablespoon of oil and avocado be ideal for your post-workout meal? No, not at all, because there's a ton of fat in there. That's probably 30 grams or 35, 40 grams of fat just in that meal, and it's gonna definitely prevent the energy release a lot more than if you have an egg white omelet cooked with minimal oil, or maybe egg whites and 1 whole egg, and then rather some carbs with that, and reserving the olive oil and stuff like that for later on. That would be the recommendation when it comes to fats. And with fiber, that is not quite as sensitive in terms of the digestion, but still a little bit. We do want that slightly on the lower side. You can still have some fiber in your pre and post workout meal, but it shouldn't be the highest fiber meal of the day. So yes, oats and some raspberries and stuff like that, totally fine, especially post workout. But should it be like a huge meal with beans and quinoa and then broccoli and whatever in your pre-workout meal? Probably not that great. Why? Because when we have something that's so hard to digest in our stomach, it draws most of the blood or a lot of the blood in your body around the stomach to help with the digestion. And during your workout or even during the initial recovery phase, we want most of the blood to be in your extremities, around your muscles, and not around the stomach. I hope that sort of makes sense. And then just a few last things. What also helps with pre and post workout, or what we can also keep in mind with pre and post workout nutrition, what's going to help even more with that, healthy fats, the omega-3s. Why? Because they are anti-inflammatory. Again, reminding you of the damaged tissue that we were talking about earlier through your workout. Damaged tissue is nothing else other than inflammation in your body. And omega-3s are going to go in there and are going to repair that quicker. So we want omega-3s, which is kind of contrary to what I was saying, with regards to the salmon. However, like those healthy fats I'm talking about, if you put that into context, I'm not talking about immediately post-workout. That's why I'm saying post-workout. So for instance, going back to our example, working out in the morning, you're having your post-workout oats with egg whites and some raspberries, and then you're having your higher fat lunch. So for instance, salmon in that meal, that would be great. Polyunsaturated fats. So that's, for instance, in your extra virgin olive oil or avocados and stuff like that. They are also very anti-inflammatory. That's why a lot of people praise the Mediterranean diet so high, because there is a lot of extra virgin olive oil in that diet. Other antioxidants, of course, so foods high in antioxidants because they also have anti-inflammatory purposes. So doing the same thing, essentially helping with recovery, not just in the muscles, joints, like everywhere in your body, basically. And that would be things like blueberries, sweet potatoes, dark leafy greens, all really, really amazing. Then, of course, that's not necessarily related to nutrition, but just generally speaking, remember that we want to set a good stress stimulus through our training. That's why we're progressively overloading, why we are pushing it hard at times. But then afterwards, the relaxation is actually where the magic happens. So make sure you're getting a good quality sleep. Make sure you're not eating too close to bedtime, for instance, or make sure you're not just from your training rushing to the next thing, Take a few minutes to calm down and then go about your day and try to be more in a calmer state. Reminding yourself constantly that you can do so much with your breath. And as I've mentioned earlier, salt is really quite important when it comes to recovery too. Of course, other things I haven't even mentioned on here, like magnesium playing a big role, or foods with potassium. So potatoes are great for that, or again, like bananas are really high in potassium as well. So that's why they also make a good pre-workout snack, for instance, why I mentioned that earlier with regards to your coffee and the banana in the afternoon. As I mentioned in the very beginning, don't overthink it. Total calories and macros are still key, so we do want to make sure that they are in place first and foremost. And then if you have those kind of nailed in over the course of the day, we can focus more on, okay, how close to our training do we actually want to be eating, or how close after training can I eat, and what's going to be most practical. Should I maybe have a shake, because by the time I get home and make dinner and take care of the kids and so on, it's going to be at least 2 hours, or how can we optimize things? Exactly. So don't need to double up. But yeah, I just thought I'd mix it up a little bit and put a small, tiny slideshow together. So if you have any feedback for me, if you enjoyed this, or if you enjoyed this more or less or whatever than the usual format, please do let me know. I will still continue to roughly every second week have a guest on. Next week, the live is actually going to be on Thursday evening. I believe it's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or 6, yes, I believe so, because I'm talking to Christia, who is a nutrition coach from the Philippines, and so we had to make time zones work. For her, it's going to be Friday morning, but it's going to be really, really cool because she's specializing in postpartum nutrition and just generally, of course, also working with a lot of other Gen Pop, but basically postpartum nutrition is one of her specialties, so I want to dig into that some more. Anyway, I hope you all have had a wonderful week. And I'm wishing you a wonderful weekend also. More relaxation, hopefully. And yeah, happy Friday.